today we are going to discuss and talk about the Islamic Sufism. So basically, one of the aspects of Islamic civilization, which was um, discussed even in the Western scholarship, and there are many literature available for those who are interested to understand Islamic Sufism. Probably one question is that what is Islamic Sufism or Islamic mysticism? Um, Sufism in Islamic culture is a word probably derived from Sauf in Arabic, which probably means that one of the meaning of the word is actually a, a kind of clothes that is made by wool, and so those people, and then the attention goes back to the people who were living with Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, around his mosque, which they built in the city of Medina after the migration of Muslims from Mecca to Medina. So this is very basic meaning of the Sufis, those who are wearing those kind of clothes, the wool clothes, those who are kind of also sincere in their um, faith, and those who, following the guidance which is coming from Quran, and they're there basically for the very goal of purifying the soul and reaching the human perfection. On the other hand, you know, to also be an example of faith and sincerity with God. An equivalent of the word Sufism in both Christianity and Judaism is mysticism. When we say sometimes the notion of something being kind of mystic, probably it may refer sometimes to a secretive nature of something. On the other hand, probably goes back to the idea that something is esoteric as well, as opposed to exoteric, so which is kind of hidden. It is not very, visible at the same time, but sort of there is some invisibility, and then one needs to gain a power, a faculty, an ability to see the invisibility of that thing. So, discussing and going back to the idea of Sufism and the Islamic tradition, there are other ideas of where this word is coming from. I already mentioned uh, the idea that Sufism is coming from those people. I mean, this is the traditionally known by, insiders, Muslims, that those who were following Muhammad, especially those people who migrated from Mecca, a group of them were poor and then living, they didn't have a home to live because they left everything of their own in the city of Mecca. And then they were living in the environment of the prophet's mosque or house of prayer. And then, so their, um, their state of being was in a way that those those people who purify themselves, and those who are seeking God, in fact, are doing the same. So, except for those meaning and you know, kind of finding the etymology of the word Sufism. At the same time, there are some other ideas that say that Sufism refers to the Arabic term safa instead of the sof that I mentioned before. And then safa is, you know, the pureness or the something which is purified, or in the case of Sufism or Sufist, the one who purified his own soul. So, and then basically, the point is that Sufism is not something that occurred and appeared only in the Islamic tradition. We do have the idea of Sufism within Judaism, with their Kabbalistic, for instance, method of mysticism, or in Christian history with very famous mystic and esoteric people, for instance, the Saint Anselm, uh, Eckhart, and many others that we know the names, and they played an important role in an exemplary way to show the others that what sincere faith to God means. Now, let's go back to Islamic mysticism. In Islamic tradition, in Islamic sciences as well, we do have different branches of sciences that Muslims try to practice. Um, Among them is the kind of, theological sciences. Theology discusses the, and tries to understand what is a correct form of understanding of God, or, what is the divine guidance, and or what's the relationship between God and the cosmos, the being, universe, and also, you know, um, human embodiment. So when some people or a scholar discussing this basic things, the truth of God, truth of religion, the human's position in this between God and creation, and then the religion itself, they were called mutakallamun in Islamic tradition, but mainly with in modern language or in English we call them theologians. And there are other people in Islamic tradition. At the same time, maybe that one branch, better to say another science in Islamic tradition, which was discussed how to practice things. If someone wants to pray, how he can does the praying with, kind of um, the ritual, how do this, how to do that, how to marry, how to divorce, and other things. Also, these things also related to the knowledge or science of fiqh, jurisprudence. I'm sorry, and jurists, appeared in Islamic tradition and Islamic culture. Now, probably there's one more group of people or not one more thing to discuss. Many Muslim, often those who were both as Sufis and I'm sorry, as sometimes some of them mutakallimun or theologians or jurists or philosophers, yeah, they were trying to understand the goal of both right activities and correct understanding of what God is or what the faith is, and things like that, or what the transformation of the soul. Uh, so, what does it mean for someone to be pure, to have complete faith, to gain perfection? What are the goal of this? So, what's the real meaning of achieving inner conformity with with God or with the real? So this group of people that were looking for the reaching to absolute reality, to understand the nature of sincerity and pureness of human being, they were called Sufis in Islamic tradition. Sufism itself, I mean, uh, as a school, many of those schools, I mean, basically things started at the early Islam. And then later in the second Islamic century, it becomes like a school of thought. A group of people are more inclined to this school or to that school. Some people more inclined into the jurisprudence or they become jurists. Some other people more inclined into the theological discussions and they become mutakallim. And then there are some others who, probably people from both these two groups or not, but mainly mostly basically the main people of those two sciences also were inclined to understand the Sufism or the path, practical and theoretical understanding of what does it mean to be perfect? What does it mean to go back to the origin? How to do this? What are the steps, from human to God, from the state that you are right now to the state that you should be? And then what is your destination and how to go to your destination? All this based in Sufism. Sufism also in Islamic sense, as well as other Abrahamic religion or other probably that in Buddhism or Confucianism also has two aspects. One aspect is the theoretical aspect, and the other aspect is its practical aspect. Sufism is not only reading a book about perfection, about the purifying the soul, or about the reality of God, or about God as real, or about the universe as really unreal and God's really real. So one can read all of this, but he's still not a Sufi in a practical term. He is the one, the Sufi is the one who practices, who accepts of having knowledge about God and the universe and human being and the interrelationship between these all three, and then the role of human in the cosmos, or having a cosmology or an idea about what the cosmos is. But in fact, the Sufi is the one who tries to practically purify himself, who practically tries to understand what's the nature of intuition, how one can gain a vision or inspired, but by putting all those prayers, all those actions, all those things that one needed to do to be purified, to be transformed, to become something and someone who has reached the purity and the goal of life that God somehow depicted for human being. So that's the transformation part. And this transformation, actually, in Islamic uh, tradition, there is an kind of basics and fundamentals for this transformation, and that's the among the Muslims is that one who wants to have a real faith and put that faith into practice must follow the example of Prophet of Islam. So, following the example of the follow of Prophet of Islam, in Arabic, the term, or in Quranic term, is taba or tabi or mutaba, the one who, you know, follows somehow or maybe imitates the practice of Muhammad. How did he was the one who was praying during the night? How did he practice in community and many other things? But Muhammad being an example, also Quran talks about Muhammad in different ways, but especially in chapter 68, verse 4, Quran mentions Muhammad as truly you are of an exalted character. So the characters traits of Muhammad or his ethical or moral behavior in the Quran is described by in Islamic sense by God as an example that others need to follow if they want to go to the perfection, if they want to reach to the goal of human life. So, one, Muhammad is being as his character being of an as an being that he being the one who has an exalted character. One in chapter 68. On the other hand, in chapter 15, verse 87, there's also another adjective referring to the Quran itself, that the Quran is mighty, is exalted. The same Arabic word, azim, used in the Quran as exalted for both Muhammad and the Quran. So, why do we need to pay attention to these words? The point is that in Islamic tradition, Muhammad is as mentioned as a practical Quran, a Quran that is in practice in the embodiment of Muhammad, in his personality. And the one who wants to follow Quran, also he wants to follow the example of Muhammad. So there is also another um, mm, saying from Aisha, the wife of Muhammad, when they asked her how or who was Muhammad, or they asked her to describe Muhammad, she refers to him as someone whose character, whose behavior, whose life was equal to the Quran. So also there is a notion among the Sufis or some group of Muslims, especially Shiites, that there is a notion of a silent Quran, which is the book itself, the revelation, and the speaking Quran. So the speaking Quran is a prophet, and the silent Quran is the book which is there. So they say that you need to have both an mixture or combination of these two to understand the true path, because you may have one of them, which is the silent Quran, which you may misunderstand it, but on the other hand, if you do have the other speaking Quran, which is Prophet, and in the Shia Islam case, also Imams as an example of those who put Quran into practice, and their ethical or character is equal to the written Quran, then you do have actually both of them, and then you follow both of them, and then it's a way to human perfection when you follow them. So, the Quran being source of Sufism, it is discussed. Also, that's not such an easy case because there are people in different religious traditions that describing Sufism or mystical understandings or Sufi cosmology as something not really from these religions, but inherits from Greek culture, Egyptian culture, old Indian culture. The answer of the Sufis to those who try to say that, oh, Sufism, it's old, very old, such and such culture of such and such group of people, and then it entered into Islam or Christianity or Judaism. And a response of those Sufis is that it's like math, a mathematical question. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, wherever or whenever you are. I mean, it doesn't depend on, the time and space. Purifying is purifying. Reaching human perfection is reaching human perfection. And there's a path toward that one. So everyone tries to, but then that's the goal of every religion, to purify yourself and to understand God and, to understand what's the role of a human being, for instance, in the world, in the cosmos, and how to behave toward other objects of this cosmos. Now, speaking about Sufism, um, mm, um, there are orders, orders as groups of people who were following the path of Sufism. So there's an idea of the order, a group of people, a joint group of people who are looking for the perfection, sincerity, purifying the soul, putting faith into practice, and finding the ways toward perfection. Those are an organized group in the Islamic tradition and Islamic history that are called Sufis. And Sufism is not only one order, there are many, many multiple, diverse group of Sufis. But there is one thing in common among them. The point is that all of them, all of those people who are following, they must have a master, which is called the Shaykh in Islamic Arabic. The Shaykh or master is the one who have already, purified himself, has seen or understood the reality of cosmos and the reality of God, or better to say, is the one who realized himself with the characters which are like the characters of God. So the notion is that the one who is perfectly purified himself and realized himself, is the one that who can lead the others into the path of God and into God Himself. To knowing God is not only theoretically, but also through your vision. Or purify yourself for a real in encountering with God. So, in the Islamic history, there are many groups, uh, orders of the people that are practicing Sufism. They spread it in all areas of Islamic lands and even other lands or countries. And nowadays, even in our contemporary time, you do have the Sufi orders from United States into very heart of Islam, part of Islamic land. There is also some notions within the Islamic tradition or within the Muslims. They were against Sufis. They called them kind of, not following the true path of Islam according to them, which is kind of a rigid or dry or exoteric practice of prayers, exoteric practice of any kind of jurisprudence or juristic practices, and that's it. And then there is no esoteric meaning to the words of the revelation. So those people have been historically a harsh opposition to Sufism, and they are still there within the Muslims. Mainly and mostly is the school of Salafism, which doesn't appreciate the mystical or esoteric understanding or esoteric or Sufi practices. On the other hand, Sufis, they emphasize on uh, the meaning or on the notion that the reality of the world is only the real, the God. And then everything in this world is a shadow of the reality. You need to understand this, that every exoteric aspect, every visible thing has an inner invisible reality. You need to reach to that reality in order to be in a harmony with God and with the cosmos. Otherwise, you're you're not in the past, or you're not the one who is in the picture. Probably you are a foreigner in that case. Sufis, as when they say that the universe has a reality which is the real or the God, or in Arabic al-Haq, they also emphasize that Quran as well has a outward meaning and inward meaning. The inward meaning is understood only by those who practice Sufism, who walk through this path, the path toward God. When they walk through this path, when they purify themselves, the knowledge is like light. Knowledge of light, God's light is coming to them. It's coming to them. It transfers them. It makes them to understand more or to see more or to see the invisible aspect of the life or invisible aspect of creation or invisible aspects of the cosmos, the things that others don't see, or the invisible aspects through the uh, intuition, through visions, through the different way of seeing. Practical Sufism, it's based on theoretical Sufism. It's based on the notion that you need to find out about the reality of existence. At the same time, you need to understand that to reach to the reality of existence, you need to purify yourself, and it goes through practice. If you don't put all those things into practice, you're not doing anything. You just read, and through reading, you cannot reach. So basically, a Sufi is the one who realized himself, as we mentioned. But why the realize? And then the relation of realization with the real. Means that there is something of real inside you that you need to, expose it, or you need to realize it, or you need to actualize it. There is a faculty. There's a faculty of something of the real of God inside you that you're actualizing it. That's why in the Sufi understanding of the cosmos, everything in this universe is a sign of God, is a presentation, is a kind of manifestation of the real itself. Everything, they do not have an independent reality by themselves. The reality of things is nothing but the real, the God Himself. So we need to understand the reality of things. And that's the vision you get through theoretical and practical Sufism, they say. If you don't put it into the practice, you see manyness, multiplicity, you know. But if you do go through the path of Sufism, you see only one. There's one real, and everything is the shadow. Signs are only signs to that real. If you take the signs as the real, then you are not gonna reach to the real. You are, or you will be busy with the signs of the real, whether real signs, or you understand or you misunderstand them sometimes. And they are, in fact, in the Sufi tradition, sometimes they are misleading if you get around being involved only in those signs. But signs are things to show you the real. So you should not be, mistaken that the sign of real is the real self or himself. So why human being is kind of why realization in human being makes him godlike, or makes him as example of, or the best example of presenting God in the cosmos. So the point is that we mentioned that the Quran talks about the signs of God everywhere. Signs of gods are equal to names of God. So if something in the universe shows beauty, that beauty is not independently driven from the reality of that thing. The beauty in something, in a flower, is coming from the beauty of God, who is, in the Quranic term, the most beautiful. In Allah Jamil. So, and if something, a sign of God, presents the beauty, it's the reality of it, it's the beauty of God. Now we do have many things in the cosmos, in the creation, and everything is presenting a name of God. Al-Jamil, or beautiful, is a name of God. There are many other names that we, like at least Quran talks about 99 names of God, the merciful, the one who has mercy upon the other ones. The reality of mercy is taken from God, and He's representing it. Now, if everything in the universe tries to represent one, two, or three names of God, there is only one created being that is representing all of the names of God in or within him or herself, and that's human being. or better to say, that's the perfect human being, the one who perfectly and in total presents names of God. So that's the one who completely or perfectly realized his own soul. In that way of transformation and transforming, he then becomes someone which is not himself anymore, because he has assigned himself also needs to get rid of himself. I mean, to pass from himself, to understand that there is no independent existence of himself. Every existence is connected to the real being, and the real being is God, and other beings are connected to the real being. If they understand this, they find the path to the inner side of reality. So the Sufi path, the Sufi practice, the Sufi, rituals is not a, a path to say that it's a path from A to Z in a way that there's a straight path. It's rather is a way more inside, is a way to go inside yourself, because that's reality, which is the inner reality. The being, the real being, is the really inner reality of human being. That's why many describe and attribute saying of Muhammad, which says that the one who understands and knows himself is the one who understands and knows his God, because there is interconnection between the very reality of human being, of very real reality of existent being, with the very reality of the real being. Now, there is a notion of understanding this. There's a notion of knowing this. There's a notion of how to know this. And that also goes back to the light, the idea of light as well. If you're connected, if you're purified, then you're connected to the light. If you're not purified, then you're not connected to the light. You're connected to the darkness. That's another example, another terminology, the Sufism. So, people of light, and God is the light of the lights, and the light which lightens the other. So, if you want to lighten with the God, understand that also Sufi says that God is the light of the as according to the Quran, the verses of known as the verse of light, is that the point is that if you want to understand the light of God, or the light of God as light, then you must lighten yourself. Then you must purify yourself. You go, you understand, and then you connect to the light. The, uh, the consequence of this understanding, this transformation, is self annihilation in God, in a way that you will be alive forever with God, in God. And then there is no and there is no death for someone who is enlightened and enlightened by the light of God. Now, there's one thing that how how Sufis try to put this realization into practice. We reached the notion of love as a central in Sufism. The only way to understand truly, or to practice the Sufi way truly and perfectly, is through the love of God. If you do have His love, then you do have an encourageness, an eagerness to go toward the path. And they show you more and more. But if you don't have that love, you can't reach you can reach your beloved. So the relation between human being and God is described as the lover and the beloved. Quran as well described in this the the, the mutual love in a verse which talks about uh, يحبهم ويحبونه, which talks about a group of people that or human being that initially God loves them, and consequently they love God. In this tradition, love of God is prior to the love of human being. He is the one who first and foremost loves, and that love gives you the ability to love back. So he loves you, and then you will be able to love him. And he is the one who loves, and he is the one who initiates the law. The law. So this the notion of law between um, people and between human being and God is described in the verse in the chapter 5, verse 54, in which Quran says God will bring a people whom He loves and who love Him. So, you know, He loves them and they love Him. This is, the way in which Muslim Sufis try to um, depict the relationship between God and human being as He loves them and they love Him. And initially, He is the one that loves first, and human being as a second. You know, so as well as we mentioned as well in the Quran, names of God are given in the Quran. The names and attributes of God. We know that Allah is a complete, a name that includes our name, all other names and attributes in itself, but there are other names of God as well. One of them is beautiful. So God is beautiful, and He loves a beautiful beauty. This is also a prophetic tradition, which is also used in the Sufi tradition as well. So love is, within the beautiful things is a beautiful thing, and that's make the relation between human being and God. And then that love also initiates the kind of human being, being able to actualize all the faculties, all the names that God, put in him, and he is now can become an example of that perfection. Now, there's also other Quranic term in chapter 3, verse 31, it says, talks about, if you love God, follow me, and God will love you. Quran talks Muhammad. Quran says to Muhammad, tell to the people, if you love God, follow me. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. So if you love God, follow me, and God will love you. So this is another aspect of love. Now, initially, before creating, before humans fall, before the fall of Adam on the earth, the love of God is initial, is absolute for human being. Here, in the state that you are, if you want to reach to that love again, follow me, because I'm the one who guides you to the love of God. And that's here you see the position of Muhammad for the Sufis. He's the one as example of that love. He's the one as example of the one who realized and actualized all those names and attributes, and who is the one who can, lead you to that perfection. Now, um, the point is that, in conclusion, in fact, um, Quran talks in different ways, talks about the inner realities of the world, and talks about God as both being the external and internal reality of things. It says that there's a verse in the Quran which talks about God is being the first and the last, the inward and the outward. This was also used by many Sufis to say that there's a notion of uh, inwardness in the reality, in the cosmos and in the universe, and the inward, the very inward, and the very uh, inside of the things, and the very essence of being is, God itself. I mean, in Latin, we say that esse and existe. So the esse is the very inward uh, essence of things, and existe is the very being or existence which shows the appearance. And then God is the esse of the existe. That way, you understand that you need to reach back to the essay, you need to reach to the reality and the real itself. Putting it to and making this discussion to conclude briefly, what we need to talk about a circle of existence, a cosmology of Sufism. Um, for Sufism, um, in the Sufi philosophy, um, and especially in the Islamic Sufi philosophy, the reality or the existence, the being, the very being, is like a circle. The circle has two arcs. One arc, there is a movement from up to down, which is called the arc of descent. And there's another part for this arc, which goes back to the first initial point, and that's another arc which is called the arc of descent. I'm sorry, the arc of ascent. So both arcs of descent and ascent are, you know, explaining the whole story of creation. One is that everything comes from God, and then comes down, and then also everything needs to go back to God again. So this is coming from God and going to go toward God is the whole practice of Sufism. How to do this, how to perfectly do this, and then how to understand the reality of real, and not mislead by many other signs and the multiplicity, and how to reach to the notion that the reality of things is one and only one, and that's God. I would like to add at the end that the many figures in Islamic tradition uh, as great Sufis. Um, I mentioned Prophet of Islam as the example about whom Quran talks and wants people to follow him if they want to, go back toward God. But then Ali, as one in many Sufi tradition, he is the one who gets the secrets of the past, the Sufi past, from Muhammad, and then through him, it's most is spread toward those who were seeking the internal Sufi path. There are many figures we can talk about them, chronologically, the historically, who comes first, who comes last. But for the sake of time, I can just let me talk about two or three figures very briefly, just mentioning their names. Probably in the West, most of the people they know Rumi. Rumi as a Muslim Sufi who lived in 8th Islamic century. Uh, and then he's also very famous in his um, Sufi mystical way of thought and teachings. Um, Plus, the other name, very famous figure, is called whose name was Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi must must be understood as a prolific Sufi writer and a very mysterious writer as well. He was Rumi. He and many others are compared to many Jewish and uh, Christian mystics. And there are many similarities and you know similarities between Islamic, Christian, and Judaic mysticism, because the past is one past and the reality is one reality according to them. And all of them, not only being Muslim or Jews or Christian, but whether they want or not, everything is in the circle, a circle of descent, and the arc of descent, and arc of ascent, whether they want or not, but whether they choose or not. Sufi says that we are choosing how to go back. This is the reality of Sufism. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk.